Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
The book show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's book show. As always, we start by looking at the bestseller lists on amazon.co.uk and the Sunday Times, the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK. Quite a few new entries again this week. Then we'll be catching up with Ed Needham. He's the editor of Strong Words magazine. He joins us monthly to review a selection of new fiction and non-fiction titles, which this month includes best-selling author Mark Haddon's memoir, Leaving Home. Also be joined by Lucy Apps, who was born in East London, trained as a doctor and works as a GP. She volunteers with women with learning disabilities. Her debut novel, Gloria Don't Speak, explores the often overlooked perspective of women with learning disabilities. And we're chatting to Radu Herklots, who studied law and retired from full-time legal work in 2019. His latest crime novel, A Deadly Finish, explores the dark side of an elite wine society. And that's just the first hour. In the second hour, we're chatting to Ruth O'Leary, Laura Clark-Walker, Howard Linsky and Julia Clarkson.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to The Book Show. The Sunday Times bestseller list, we start with that. That's the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK and the one that every author wants to be on. It's the most accurate estimation of book sales in the country. Interestingly, Frida McFadden's latest novel, Want to Know a Secret, which I've almost finished, debuts at number 1 in fiction paperbacks. It's her second novel to reach the top spot in 2026 thus far, after Dear Debbie in February. So starting with general hardbacks, there are 3 new entries this week. Still at number 1 is A Hymn to Life by Giselle Pellicott. Number 2 is a new entry called Tender by Harry Baker. It's a collection of poems reflecting on the first 100 days of fatherhood. Number 3, a new entry called Bloody Dangerous by Colin Bell, an RAF mosquito pilot's raids on Germany during the Second World War. I know Giles spoke to him earlier this week and said, my goodness, unbelievably fascinating. Number 4 is Always Remember by Charlie Mackesy. Number 5, Feeling Fabulous by Ruth Langsford. Number 6, To the Women by Donna Ashworth. Number 7, The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Number 8 is William and Catherine by Russell Myers. Number 9, My Gardening Life by Mary Berry. And number 10 is the other new entry called Old and Learning to Love It by Prue Leith, The Trials, Taboos and Unexpected Joys of Growing Older. Looking at fiction hardbacks, there are 7 new entries from last week, including number 1, Fallen Stars by Imani Iriu. On the Run, Alara must find allies and master her powers. It's the sequel to Heavenly Bodies. Number 2, a new entry called Berwick by L.J. Ross. DCI Ryan faces a terrible possibility when his own wife is arrested for murder. Number 3, Felicia's Favourites by Danielle Steele. Number 4, a new entry called The Last Starborn Seer by Venetia Constantine. A woman with volatile magic seeks a relic to cure a sickness cursing her country. Number 5, a new entry called A Far-Flung Life by M.L. Stedman. The lives and loves of a family living in remote outback Western Australia in 1958. Number 6 is One Woman's War by Rosie Goodwin. Number 7, Between Two Fires by Christopher Buellman. In 1348, a disgraced knight escorts a strange orphan across a plague-marred France. Number 8 is Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. Number 9, a new entry called Green and Deadly Things by Jen Lyons. To aid against a monstrous magic, a knight awakens an undead wizard. And the final new entry at 10, The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. A letter-writing habit forces a woman to confront a painful time. Moving on to Amazon.co.uk, your top 10 bestsellers this week. Number 1 is Betrayal, Power, Deceit and the Fight for the Future of the Royal Family. This is by Tom Bauer. Number 2 is Fluffy Chick by Rod Campbell. Number 3, The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Number 4, Filling Meals by Lindsay Wilson. Number 5, The Names by Florence Knapp. Number 6 is The Women by Kristen Hanna. Number 7, Cardiff Mums 5 Meals for £25 by Ashley Mogford. Number 8, Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConey. Number 9, Project Hail Mary, which is now a film starring Ryan Gosling. This is by Andy Weir. And number 10, Cozy Corner, a calm and comforting colouring book by Coco Wyo.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Ed Needham. He's the editor and publisher of Strong Words magazine. He joins us on the Book Show every month to give us some new fiction and non-fiction book reviews. How are you, Ed?
I'm very well, thanks. Yes, lovely to be with you.
Good, great to have you with us. So let's start with fiction. Jonathan Miles's book, Eradication.
Yes. Okay. So this is a very intriguing novel, Eradication. It's also short. It's a quality which I quite admire in a novel, brevity, and it's in part about what isolation can do to a person. So we tend to think of desert islands as quite romantic places. You know, if you see them in advertising and travel writing, you know, you think of lovely beaches, unspoilt, you know, lots of glamorous people with terrific hair. But in fiction, they tend to be quite nightmarish. You know, desert islands are places where you end up having to confront some aspect of yourself that is kept buried usually for a very good reason. So if you think of Lord of the Flies, where the boys all go mad in no time at all, or Robinson Crusoe, a place where cannibals go to kill and eat their prisoners. So this is very much in the latter category, this island in Eradication. It's a place of very confrontational, emotional situations. So it's an island perhaps somewhere in the Caribbean. We're not entirely sure where it is, but it's a few hours by boat from the home city of the main character, who for some reason is being transported out to this desert island to perform a job. And we don't know at first what it is or why he's there, but these things are gradually revealed. So the captain of this little boat and the crew member are laughing at him. They're calling him the sniper or something like that because he has a gun with him and a mountain of ammunition, and they drop him off with several weeks worth of food and water. The island is unoccupied, but it turns out that his job is to spend the next 5 weeks clearing the island of its goat population, because the goats are eating all the vegetation and some of it is endangered, and this in turn is destroying the food chain for or other endangered species. So the goats have to go, and there are thousands of them, and he has to shoot them. So we gradually start to see why this man has accepted this job. You know, he's in a bit of a predicament. He needs the money. He needs to get away, but he is just hopelessly unsuited for this task. So the book follows him from day one as he has to confront his ability or inability to shoot these goats, which, you know, when he was back on the mainland, it felt like a simple job, of course, you know, and of course I can do that. But out here on his own in the middle of nowhere, it takes on a completely different complexion, and he really struggles to do it. You know, these creatures are alive, they have habits, they have families. So he's facing a real problem. He's thinking, what am I going to do? And then, as things tend to on desert islands in novels, things get worse, and he has to start making some really difficult decisions. So I won't tell you what they might be, but it's a really curious and engaging little story, and you really feel that you are out there on this island with him, facing these dilemmas. And it's only about 160 pages long, so it's an easy read. But as you learn more about this character, the more you identify with him and this predicament that he finds himself in. So it's called Eradication, and it's by, let me just check who it's by, Jonathan Miles.
Gosh, yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's one of those things that some people probably wouldn't have an issue with it, but I think a lot of people would really struggle to do that.
Quite. I mean, I think, and it's just the idea of a desert island, it appeals in so many respects. Everybody, I think, would like to get away at some point, but you really don't need to think about it very hard before you realise that actually this is not a place for most people's sort of mental limitations. You would start to go mad and look deep inside yourself, not in a good way, very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, then we have Lost Lambs. There's a sheep theme, Lost Lambs by Madeline Cash.
Very barnyard animal trend. So yes, this is a very different book, Lost Lambs. And I've seen this in a lot of bookshop windows lately, which means it's either doing very well or the publishing company has decided to put some effort behind it, which means they think it's going to do very well. So, all positive signs. And it's quite good fun. It's a comedy about an imploding suburban marriage in the United States where the parents are held together by just by a string from the very outset. So it's not like we watch them fall into a decline. They are already on the edge of a cliff from the very beginning. So mother is thinking, maybe she should be having an affair with the neighbor. Father is thinking, oh, what's the point of all this? Perhaps I should end it all. But he doesn't really have the energy for that either. And they have 3 daughters, and the older one is about 17, and she is quite hot, and she's keen to get out there and meet men. And she has a very taciturn boyfriend who has just left the military. And I think his name is something like War Crimes Wes. He's very ominous name. But anyway, she thinks he's fantastic. And the middle one is kind of ignored in all this competition of personalities. And as no one is paying attention to her, she has opened up an online correspondence with a terrorist. And then the younger one is a very precocious sort of genius, 12-year-old, something like that, genius. But she is so clever that she is hopelessly bored. And she has started looking through her father's spreadsheets at work. He works for a sort of the port company with all the, where they bring all the sort of container terminal. And she has noticed that a strange shipping container has been coming into the port where he works that has not been accounted for. So no one else spotted it, but she, being the genius, has realized there is something coming in that is not being recorded properly. So the whole thing is set up a bit like a sitcom. You've got all these zany, offbeat characters all competing to be funny or to do something to grab the reader's attention. And the author sustains it really well. It's really charming and amusing. And she even manages to navigate the tricky bit when things get serious, and which is hard to do if you've built your characters on being funny. So highly recommended as a witty comedy. And it has at least one great piece of advice in it, which is that if you must have an affair, do not have one with your next door neighbour. So
that sounds like good advice.
That's Lost Lambs by Madeline Cash, or at least find out what they've got in the basement first.
Okay, fair enough. Then we have Warning Signs by Tracy Sierra.
Okay, yes, this is really good. Warning Signs. This is a very creepy thriller. And you might have heard of Tracy Sierra's previous book, which was called Night Watching. And it's a book which I've raved about a lot in strong words over the last couple of years. And it's involves a woman in an isolated house with her 2 children in a snowstorm. And she suddenly becomes aware of a person in the house who shouldn't be there. So, that's her previous book, Night Watching. This one, Warning Signs, is also about people trapped in the snow, but it's a very different kind of scenario. So this one is about a father-son skiing weekend where a group of men are taking their young kids to do some bonding on the ski slopes in the Colorado Rockies. And the action is seen through the eyes of one of the sons. So he's a boy called Zach. He's lost his mother. She was the one who taught him how to ski and stay safe on the mountains, but she ended up drinking herself into an early grave. And when you see the boy's father, you get an idea why. So here's a bully. He's constantly handing out instructions to this young lad. And on one hand, the boy can't stand him, But on the other hand, he's yearning for his dad's approval. And you soon learn that this father-son trip has an ulterior motive, which is that Zach's dad is trying to impress his guests enough to invest in his company. He's trying to win them over with his sort of super salesman pitch, aren't I a cool guy? Look how great I am. And there are a couple of other sort of unnerving aspects right at the beginning. So they discover, as they're kind of trekking up to this lodge on this snowy mountain, they discover an elk dead in the snow. And it looks from its body language like it's sleeping. It looks very placid and peaceful. But they look a bit closer and all the skin and all the flesh has been stripped from its head and shoulders, completely clean. So it's very spooky. What could possibly have done that? And then the other thing is that an assistant from the office is supposed to have visited the ski lodge to prepare everything, but she never made it there. So this is another mystery. So naturally, the organizer, this very pushy, bullying father, he's very angry about this and he starts to throw his weight around. He's ordering Zach about. And the kid pretty quickly starts to realize that something is amiss. Not everything that he is overhearing in this remote ski lodge can be true. And then the guests arrive, but there's an avalanche that traps some of the people and the boy has to work out who he can trust and who he can't. So I spoke to Tracy Sierra for strong words about this book, and she said she grew up in this kind of environment, very well-to-do ski resorts, where some of her friends' fathers were like this. They were very wealthy, very competitive. They were men, who were actually behind the scenes were actually up to no good and turned out to be quite bad people who ended up going to jail. So you get a really authentic sense of what it's like to be a younger person around these very dominant but kind of panicking characters as their need to be in control comes up against forces that are beyond them. So that is called Warning Signs, and it's by Tracy Sierra.
It's interesting that her surname's Sierra, meaning mountains or mountain range in Spanish,
yes.
And that's where it's all set.
It should really be nieve, because all her books about snow rather than
funny.
mountains. But anyway, she's really good. Her last book was great, and this book is great too. There are a lot of thrillers come out where the blurb or the marketing really, kind of over delivers. And when you actually get in there, you realize it doesn't measure up to the hysteria on the cover. But her books really, they do it for me.
Great. Then moving on to non-fiction, Bonfire of the Murdochs by Gabrielle Sherman.
Yes, Gabrielle Sherman is a Vanity Fair writer. And Bonfire of the Murdochs has been getting a tremendous amount of coverage lately, loads of attention, but I feel it deserves as much as it can get because it's an absolutely riveting story. So if you're a fan of the TV series Succession, you can see here in this story of Rupert Murdoch and the Murdoch families competing for his behavior, for his favor over the decades, or often, if not competing for his favour, they're competing to get away from him. There are so many parallels between the real-life Murdochs and the fictional Roy family in Succession, that it feels like every other page contains some element of that absolutely riveting family drama. So it starts with a court case, and it's quite a recent court case in, I think it's 2022, 23, something like that. Not quite sure, but within the last few years. And Rupert Murdoch in his 90s now, so still fighting in his 90s. And this court case is an attempt by him to break up an agreement made when he divorced his second wife, Anna. And when they got divorced, she gave a large part of the money that she would have been entitled to in exchange for an agreement that said her 3 children, together with Rupert's other daughter from his first marriage, they would each have an equal vote on the future of the company on Rupert's death. And that was so that none of them could be manoeuvred out of the power and the money of the Murdoch companies. So it's supposedly an irrevocable agreement, but Rupert, being a billionaire, has decided he wants to revoke it. So, and there's nothing he can do when he puts his lawyers to work, like all these billionaires. What they want, they tend to get. So he wants the company to be run after he has gone by his oldest son, Lachlan. But the sort of blood in the family by this time is so bad that if this agreement remains in place, as one Australian journalist puts it, Lachlan gets fired the day Rupert dies, because his siblings will just vote him out. They've had it with him. So this book, Bonfire of the Murdochs, is really the story of how things have come to this. And it's a story of how Rupert built his empire. So it's an account of great entrepreneurial daring, an account of his efforts to impress his father, an account of all the people he trampled over to get what he wanted. And then having created this great media empire, he is worth 20-something billion now, I don't know what. He then set his children on a sort of Darwinian struggle against each other. So one by one, the children leave the company because they can't stand the competition and being set against each other. And one by one, Rupert draws them back in because he needs them on the inside for the family to keep running the business when he's gone. So, but he just can't help creating these scenarios where they are constantly at war with each other. It's a superb family drama. All the wives, all the money, all the betrayals, but unlike Succession, it's also true. So that's Bonfire of the Murdochs by Gabriel Sherman.
It's interesting, isn't it, looking at these families, for most of us, most people going through life wish they had more money, so they had more freedom, could buy more things, could go on more holidays, and yet these people that never have to want for anything seem to be very unhappy.
It's one of the great mysteries, isn't it? It doesn't matter how much money they've got, it's never enough. They have to always be competing for more, to perhaps measure themselves against, their fellow billionaires, or for some reason, it's never enough. They can never stop and say, actually, I'm just going to sit on my yacht now and drink champagne for the rest of my life. They would just die of boredom within 24 hours. They've got to keep causing trouble for each other.
Then we have Mark Haddon and his book, Leaving Home. He was actually a guest on Talk Radio Europe recently.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, this is a terrific book. It's a really good memoir. Most people will know Mark Haddon as the author of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time. Huge hit in 2003, and it's about a 15-year-old boy called Christopher who has behavioural problems. He's somewhere on the autistic scale, struggles to build relationships with others. He makes unusual connections, so he's quite bright. And he sets himself in the book a sort of Sherlock Holmes project to work out why a dog was killed with a garden fork on the lawn next door. So it's a huge hit and became a successful West End play. Mark Haddon has gone on to write lots of other books, is also an accomplished illustrator and artist, and Leaving Home is his memoir, and it describes two big threads in his life that led to the curious incident and beyond. So one is that he's not entirely dissimilar to Christopher in the novel. He's not the same, but he's also exceptional in many ways, and he's prone to quite severe breakdowns. And the other big theme is his quite spectacularly miserable mother. And there are few characters more difficult in all of literature than Mrs. Haddon. So Leaving Home is also a description of this relationship and how over time he managed to put some different distance between himself and this very demanding and joyless individual. But his recollections are also quite funny, have this effective mixture of being things that happened to him, so they're quite poignant, but also, they're shared with readers who have never heard of this strange person before, which makes them, these stories very eccentric and enjoyable. It's very sort of enjoyable to watch as a reader. So he's had quite a lot to battle through in his life, quite serious mental challenges, had a serious heart attack, which he finds easier to deal with than all the mental turmoil. But he emerges as a very, very kind and generous individual, very honest and self-aware. This is not a humble brag kind of memoir. He is very, very sincere and all the more likable for it. And I think there's, plenty of people faced with, say, the high walls of depression or family traumas who will also find this book genuinely helpful. So that's Leaving Home by Mark Haddon.
Great. And finally, Generation Desperation by Alexander Hurst.
Yes, some more desperation now, financial desperation, especially of the millennial variety. So Alexander Hurst is an American, but he was raised in Brazil in the favelas where his parents were doing missionary work or volunteer work, something like that. Then he grew up in a rundown section of Cleveland, Ohio, and now he lives in Paris and has been there for quite some time. He is a proper expat. His problem is that unlike when his parents started moving around the world, everything is now so expensive. There's no version of the starving artist in a Parisian garret anymore because no one can afford a garret on a starving artist's income. And to make things worse, as his parents have kind of been living on a shoestring, there's no money coming his way further down the road, unlike many millennials whose parents have done all right, with their property and their investments and so on. So what to do? He thinks if he's not careful, he's going to be stuck in a tiny flat with a flatmate he doesn't much care for. He's not much of an attraction for a girlfriend. He's never going to be in a position to do anything but drudge work to kind of keep body and soul together. So his solution is to play the stock market. He borrows some money, he sets himself up with an account, and he starts playing, and he learns all the jargon, which I think is the thing that helps him to convince himself that he really knows what he's doing, because he kind of speaks the language. And his first trades prove to be successful. So, great, do some more. And the next one's successful too. And then COVID hits, so he can spend all day trading. And before he knows it, he's made himself $1 million.
Wow.
Now, money comes with all sorts of fantasies. If I had $1 million, I would spend it on A, I would spend it on B, I would buy myself this, that, and the other. But when he gets there, he finds that, again, that all he wants is more. He just wants more money. It's not quite enough. And as the subtitle of this book tells you, How I Made and Lost $1 Million, things don't exactly go to plan. So in some ways, this is an old story, of flying too close to the sun, of thinking you've come up with a gambling method to beat the odds, of believing your own shtick. But in other ways, it's also a story of this decade. It's very much a story of now and of a generation of people worrying that they will never be able to afford property. They'll never be able to have any job security. And they live with this constant low-level panic that the only way to avoid things getting worse is to come up with a really drastic and extreme solution. So that is Generation Desperation, and it's by Alexander Hurst.
Wow. Love the sound of that. Not from it just sounds like a great story, but not a great ending potentially.
Well, the wheel keeps turning.
Yes.
He just can't stop. He can't, when he thinks if I've got $1 million is enough. If I just had €1 million, I would be fine. But when he gets to $1 million, he realizes I'd like a bit more, and he overplays his hand.
And it all goes wrong. Well, thank you, Ed Needham, editor and publisher of Strong Words magazine. Some great recommendations there. If people want more recommendations or want to read some really interesting interviews with authors, they should definitely sign up to Strong Words magazine. They can do it all online, can't they?
Yes, they can. They absolutely should subscribe immediately. There's nothing more urgent to do at the moment. So please do that at strong-words.co.uk. The magazine is now completely digital. So if you subscribe, there's no, nuisance with postage or anything like that. Costs the same wherever you are in the world, and you get it immediately. And you can also sign up for free to the Strong Words Sunday Book Club newsletter, which is also full of loads of recommendations about new books and news. So that's strong-words.co.uk.
Perfect. Ed Needham, thank you very much for being with us. Have a great month, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Likewise. My pleasure as always.
This is Talk Radio Europe.
Online at TRE.radio.
Dave Hodgson.
Back in the early 2000s, a young boy called Matty fell in love with a football team called Arsenal. It was the glory days when they were winning and doing very well indeed. But it wasn't to last. And inevitably, the football team let him down.
Daybreak.
Matty is a little bit upset today. So, Matty, we send you all our love, prayers and appreciation. Thank you, Matty.
I can't believe you just done that.
Join Dave Hodgson on Daybreak, weekdays from 8 a.m. here on TRE.
US Tax Consultants bring you Daybreak on TRE, specializing in Spanish and US taxes for expats since 1965. USTaxConsultants.es.
We have fun on a Thursday afternoon.
If you make your legs shorter, your hands are going to...
You can hear thoughtful comments and reflections.
I love when I see people who are heavier than me and wearing shorts or skirts and stuff, and I think good on you. I wish I'd had the confidence to do that.
But above all, you'll have a proper good laugh. Join me, Hannah Murray, and my guests on Men and Women Talk, Thursdays from 5 p.m. here on Talk Radio Europe.
Yeah, people go on holiday and sometimes, completely lose their inhibitions, and when it comes to alcohol and sex.
I've not been on any of it.
TRE Talk Radio Europe.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
The Book Show with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Lucy Apps. She was born in East London, trained as a doctor and works as a GP. She volunteers with women with learning disabilities. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her debut novel, Gloria Don't Speak, and it explores the often overlooked perspective of women with learning disabilities. Welcome to the Book Show, Lucy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's great to have you, and congratulations on your debut novel. Must be very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it is.
So how did this come about then? What made you want to write this book?
I think mostly it was just seeing that there really isn't much representation of adults with learning disability in fiction, be that in novels, be that on TV shows, in films. It's a perspective that isn't really there. And so I think I started thinking about wanting to write from that point of view.
And are there specific learning disabilities that you wanted to focus on?
Well, I mean, learning disability essentially means a kind of intellectual disability. So I decided to write from the point of view of somebody with what you might call a moderate learning disability rather than a severe or a mild learning disability, just because of the complexity of using language, really. That seemed like probably the less represented level, and also a level that could work on the page, I think.
Because your main character, Gloria, is also autistic, isn't she?
Yes, yeah.
So the two things aren't necessarily connected, though, are they?
No. I mean, you could have autism and not have a learning disability, and you could have a learning disability and not have autism.
Okay. I thought learning disabilities was like an umbrella term, is it?
So I think you may be thinking of learning difficulties.
Okay.
So a learning difficulty is a specific difficulty with one particular area of learning. So, for example, dyscalculia or dyslexia.
Right.
But you don't have an overall cognitive or intellectual disability. It's just that, for example, written words will be something that you struggle with, or maths will be something that you struggle with. But in general, you don't have an intellectual disability. A learning disability means an intellectual disability, and it's actually defined in terms of IQ level. So in terms of moderate, severe and mild, the level, it means which level of IQ somebody has, which isn't really a nice way to think about it or talk about it, but it is also the most kind of specific way, and the way that makes the definition easier to understand, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what it actually means.
Yeah.
And people can have autism and have a learning disability, and yes, Gloria does, but at the same time you can be an autistic person and not have a learning disability. So yeah, the two things don't necessarily go hand in hand.
Yeah. And what kind of age are people generally diagnosed with a learning disability? How does it come to light?
So I think it will be picked up usually in school, as kind of difficulties emerge in the classroom with kind of schoolwork and stuff. I'm not hugely involved in the diagnostic process at all. I mean, I'm not at all involved in it. So I'm just telling you what I know, just kind of based on secondhand information. I think it's normally picked up as kids grow and sort of aren't hitting the developmental or academic milestones that they're expected to.
Okay. So tell us about your character of Gloria.
So she's 19. When the book starts, she's just finished full-time education. And often at that point, for adults with learning disabilities, there's really not much provision or much to do. And they've been in kind of full-time education up until usually age 18 or 19. And then after that, they're sort of left to their own devices a lot. And it can be like quite a difficult time for the adult with learning disability and for their families. So it picks up there for Gloria and follows her really through adulthood at different points. So it goes through a period of her life when she's 19 in her early 20s, and then a period when she's in her late 30s. So she doesn't speak a lot. She's kind of got her own view on things. She's got her own likes and dislikes. She will make choices that suit her, but she does it in quite a quiet way. So she'll often just remove herself from situations that she doesn't like, rather than trying to say things or correct things or anything. Yeah, she's quite feisty in her own way, I think.
And have you met women like her?
Well, I've met a lot of women with learning disabilities, but Gloria isn't based on any particular individual. She kind of developed as I was writing the story. The character kind of came more and more to life. I looked back at some early starts that I made, and she was quite different. But the more I thought about her, the more I got to know her, the more she developed on the page. But she's not based on anyone particular. I've met plenty of women with similar level of kind of need or similar level of disability, but I haven't actually met a Gloria.
Yeah. And what does your work entail then, working with these women?
So I volunteer with women with learning disabilities, and it's kind of a brilliant project, actually. It's a group called Powerhouse. They work in my home borough of Needham, and we just do various activities. Like, a lot of it's depending on what the women want to do. So kind of various trips, working on reading and writing, working on art projects, going for walks, going off out to different cafes and stuff, just whatever people like. It's kind of user-led, like it's whatever people fancy doing. But it's a nice atmosphere, great bunch of women, and a nice kind of safe environment for people to socialise in.
Yeah. So are these women looking for work, or?
I think some of them might be, yeah. But we're not involved in, well, as far as I'm aware, I mean, I just go there to volunteer, so I'm just basically having fun.
Yeah, so it's a social group, really.
Yeah. Nice. And I'm just going there to kind of just get involved and have fun, really. I think some of the women are looking for work, but I don't think it's something that we particularly do in terms of finding employment for people.
Okay. And with regards to Gloria and what happens to her, does her learning disability affect her socially?
Yes, it does. I mean, that and her autism would as well. Yeah, I mean, she struggles with communication. She struggles with putting thoughts and feelings into words and creating sentences and saying them aloud. So obviously that's going to impact a lot on her social communication. And then I think she doesn't always understand, in the same way that other people don't always understand her and the logic of her behaviour and where she's coming from, she doesn't always understand other people's behaviour and logic and where they're coming from and why they're doing and saying the things that they're doing and saying. So there can be a kind of just mismatch in assumption and in communication that leads her and whoever she's communicating with down two different parallel paths.
Right. And there's also another big character in the book called Jack. Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, so Gloria meets him when she's 19, and she's sort of in college when she meets him, but they continue a friendship through the summer when she's finished college. And he is quite a volatile guy, quite a dodgy guy that I think a lot of people would see him and he's got this sort of angry energy and they probably would avoid him. But Gloria sees past that and they get talking and they get to know each other and they start to hang around together. And he kind of does like to go off on rants, and because Gloria doesn't speak a lot and will listen to him, they have a bit of a kind of symbiotic relationship in that respect. And they sort of have this uneasy friendship and get on with each other and create a space for each other that both of them need in different ways.
It's interesting, isn't it, how people can be drawn together like that?
Yeah, it is. And it's, maybe on the surface an unlikely friendship. And there's a lot about it that's dangerous, and that I expect the reader probably wants to see Gloria free of. But at the same time, there is something about it that draws them together and that works for them, at least for a short while.
Yeah. And now the book is out there, has it made you want to write more, either about the same characters or something completely different?
Yeah, I mean, I love writing. I can't really stop writing. I find it quite addictive. So I'm writing more, and going through the editing process on this book was brilliant for me. Really taught me a lot. And I had another draft that I was working on before I got the publishing offer for this book. So I've been in the points when I'm waiting for the editors to get back to me, I've been working on the other book. So yeah, I've got something that I'm hoping is ready to go.
Okay, perfect. Well, in the meantime, if listeners want to get a copy of Gloria Don't Speak, it's available on our website, TRE.radio, in the bookshop section. And it's by Lucy Apps, who we've been chatting with today. Lucy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are listening to The Book Show with Hannah Murray on TRE.
Joining us on the line now is Radu Herklots. He studied law and retired from full-time legal work in 2019. He's successfully published 3 crime novels. His detective hero, John Tedesco, is named after a Plymouth Argyle player. The latest book in the series, A Deadly Finish, explores the dark side of an elite wine society. Welcome to the book show, Radu.
Hi, thank you very much, Hannah.
Oh, pleasure. Great to have you with us. So tell us about your main character, your detective hero, John Tedesco.
Okay, well, John Tedesco is a bachelor in his 50s who lives in a very nice apartment in the Cathedral Close of a fictional cathedral city that's partly based on where I live in Salisbury. He had a career as a lawyer, including advising the bishop on legal matters, which ties him into the cathedral. He formed a detective agency with one of his former clients, who was a CID officer called Lynn. She features in the first 3 books. She's now moved on. His friend, Joss Elstead, who is a wine merchant, kind of works with him. And John's interested in wine as well. So they've got this informal alliance called Crime and Wine. Hence the fact this book, A Deadly Finish, is very much focused on the setting in the wine club. And is there a little bit of you in John? A bit. I'm actually happily married and not a bachelor. He also has a border terrier, which I don't have, but my family have had over the years. But yes, he supports Plymouth Argyle as I do, and things like that. So there's a bit there. But he's also based on various people. Most characters are an amalgamation of people you've met over the years. They're not really based on one particular person, otherwise it wouldn't be fiction. Yeah, no, fair enough. But his kind of background in law goes along with yours, I suppose. That does some heavy lifting, that's fair. Yeah. So did you spend quite a lot of time creating this character? Was it him that came to you before the books and the stories? It kind of did. The setting for the books, so apart from the latest one, is very much set in and around the Cathedral Close, a fictional cathedral city in Devon, roughly situated where Totnes is. That's the location, but really it's very much based on my experiences of working in Winchester and living in Salisbury. And that cathedral connection is big. In fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday at an event who said what they liked about the books was that the cathedral itself was almost one of the characters, because it features a lot, and there's lots of nooks and crannies and places where nefarious acts can take place. Inevitably, any kind of cathedral city, you do get quite a few quirky characters around the place that you can use to build your own characters on. Yeah, it must be nice having experience working in a cathedral. I think a lot of people would have visited cathedrals, as a tourist around the world, but not thought much more about it. No, well, because I do guiding now, once a week at the Salisbury Cathedral, and take groups of visitors around. So when it's very quiet in the winter, when we don't get quite so many visitors, and we're always inundated for much of the year, but in the winter, if you've got a quiet moment, it's a good time to have a look around and think where maybe the next body could be put, and so on. So tell us about this wine society in the book. Are you a lover of wine yourself? Was it easy to research this one? I'm not. I do like wine, and in fact do belong to a club like this in Salisbury, which will probably be chucking me out, I expect, once they've read the book. But it's not really based on them. The characters in it are rather different than the other ones. The other books are very much set in the cathedral. This is very much in the enclosed world again of the wine society. Enclosed worlds are good places to have mysteries. And it's kind of a bit based on the old-fashioned Agatha Christie idea of a meeting at the end where the murderer is revealed. And it's a meeting of the wine club when they're having a tasting. And the surviving members of the club, because quite a few have been bumped off, are sort of interrogated over a glass of wine, and eventually the truth comes out. So that's the kind of conceit of how it works. So I wanted to ask you about some of the other characters in the book. There's a fellow private detective called Tony Camacho. What can you tell us about him? Well, that may be of particular interest. He lives in Madeira. The action in this book actually moves outside the cathedral city for quite a while. It's a Madeira. The Madeira wine is one of the wines that may or may not be a significant poisoning agent in the book. So, yes, there's this rather interesting character called Tony Camacho, who has a visiting card which describes him as Font Charles Gentleman Extraordinaire, at your service Monday to Friday at Rosalita's bar from 6 p.m. So he's a bit of a mix of Mr. Fix-It, and he ends up going back to the Cathedral City with John Tedesco and helping him out with the final resolution of the case.
And what about the former royal correspondent, Sir Reggie?
Yes, well, again, of course, the royal correspondent's in the news quite a bit at the moment with the Epstein scandal and so on. And they always pop up. And it's not based on anybody in particular, but you get people like ex-equerries and so on who keep popping up. There's a chap called Dickie Arbiter who used to be on quite a bit. So maybe that's a bit of a nod to him. But this chap's he doesn't appear very often in the book, but he's rather like a fast show character. He's got certain catchphrases and so on, and he's quite entertaining, I think.
Yeah. So is this book 4 in the series?
It is. It's book 4 in the series. That's right. I'm currently working on book 5, hopefully out for Christmas.
Oh, great. So do you know how many there's going to be in the series? Is that planned?
No. I mean, I've been doing it for a while. I'm trying to do one book a year. I had a gap when I did a book of short stories and then brought Tedesco back kind of by readers wanting, I think whilst the readers are there and they want to read more, then we'll keep doing them.
Yeah.
And then last year I gave him a bit of a rest and did a sort of childhood autobiography about my days in Plymouth as growing up called Home Park Heaven, which, to my great surprise, has turned out to be my best-selling book and is doing very, very well, not just down there, because it's really about what it's like growing up in the 60s in a provincial city that isn't Liverpool. So it's nice and short, and again, the critics all think it's very funny, so that's nice. So that's, if anybody listening has Plymouth connections, particularly from the 60s and 70s, I think they'll like that one.
Yeah, no, it's great to get so much positive feedback, both for the memoir and for the novels.
Yes, it is good. It makes it worthwhile. It's enjoyable. You wouldn't do it if it wasn't, but you have to be disciplined, and there's quite a lot of hard work involved.
Yeah. And the difference between writing a memoir, something that was obviously personal and talking about your own experiences, compared to writing a novel, how did you find that?
Very different. Interesting. One of the more snide critics said I should stick to memoir writing. That's where my talents are. But on the other hand, I've got a very loyal crime readership, and I think I don't know that many of them read that and maybe thought it was a bit of an odd diversion. It is a different skill, and I had to really condense it. The memoir is only 100 pages, and it's not really about me. It's a story about growing up in the 60s and what it was like with all the exciting stuff going on, the Beatles and so on. But I condensed it down from 400 pages to 100, just to make it short and sweet, and I think that's worked.
Yeah. Well, if people want to get a copy of your latest novel, A Deadly Finish, it's out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Radu Herklots, who we've been chatting with today. Radu, thanks so much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much, Hannah.
The Book Programme, presented by Hannah Murray.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second part of today's book show. In the first hour, we heard from Ed Needham, Lucy Apps and Radu Herklots. In this hour, we're chatting to Ruth O'Leary. She's a Dublin author whose debut novel, The Weekend Break, was an immediate Irish Times bestseller. Her third novel, The Last Week of Him, takes us to the wild and atmospheric location of Northwest Mayo. The tragic death of a school friend brings her characters back home to reunite for 1 week. But when shocking truths are revealed, will it tear them apart or strengthen their bond? We're also chatting to Laura Clark-Walker, who has been fascinated by ghost stories her entire life, which has influenced her writing immensely. Cold Harbour is a gripping gothic fantasy with a strong sense of place. It's a love letter to British seaside towns and 90s nostalgia. It's also a celebration of family and poses questions about heritage and belonging. We're chatting to Howard Linsky, a former journalist whose works include books set in the Northeast, including the DC Ian Bradshaw series and 2 espionage novels. Muse of Fire is book 2 in the William Shakespeare mysteries, evoking the danger and everyday struggles of people in Elizabethan England. And we're chatting to Julia Clarkson, who lived and worked in London before moving to Brighton. One of her stories was shortlisted by the novelist Beryl Bainbridge for an international short story competition. Chicken and Chips is her first foray into writing young adult fiction and aims to expose the devastating ripple effects of addiction. And that is your book show for this week.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Ruth O'Leary. She's an author from Dublin whose debut novel, The Weekend Break, was an immediate Irish Times bestseller. Her second novel, A Week to Remember, spent 2 weeks in the Irish Times bestseller list when it was published in March last year. She's back with us on the Book Show to talk about her third novel, The Last Week of Him. It takes us to the wild and atmospheric location of Northwest Mayo. This area, which is known as the hidden gem of the wild Atlantic Way, sees the return of 3 childhood friends. They've kept in touch over the years and attended each other's weddings, but with the busyness of life, they keep up mainly through Instagram posts and WhatsApp messages. It's actually a shocking WhatsApp message from their former school that tells them that their school friend has died. Welcome to the Book Show, Ruth.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be back again.
Oh, it's lovely to have you back with us. And an interesting idea for a story. Where did the inspiration for this one come from?
Well, the idea came, so I get most of my ideas when I'm going out for a walk. Before I was a writer, I thought writers were these, really inspirational people who sat down at computers or typewriters and ideas just came to them. But that is far from the truth. And most of my ideas happen when I'm out walking. And I was out for a walk and I kept getting WhatsApp messages on my phone from a new book club that I joined. And the messages were coming in from different parts of the world. And as irritating as it is when you're out on a walk to kind of go, oh, no, not another WhatsApp message, I actually just got an image of in my head of 3 people getting a WhatsApp message at the exact same time that shocks the 3 of them because I write multiple characters and I write female characters. So I thought, okay, well, if they're going about their business, and the reality is that any of us at any day or any time could get a WhatsApp message or a phone call that changes our lives forever. So so basically the book opens with Nora, who's in Dublin, Fern, who's in London, and Chloe, who's in New York, receiving the same WhatsApp message that shocks them. And the message is that their close friend from school has died. Now, these girls were inseparable when they were in secondary school, and they grew up in a very small town in Ireland called Belmullet. So I write about real locations. And they grew up there, and they were inseparable, and it was a mixed school. But like most small towns, once they became 18, they had to move away for college. And the girls moved away to different colleges and their lives went in different directions. But they always still considered themselves best friends. Although with the busyness of life, they really only met up probably once a year, but they kept in touch through Instagram. And it brings 2 things. So the first idea was about the fact that we can get a WhatsApp message at any time that changes our life. And the second thing that I want to explore was the fact that a lot of us, how well do we really know our closest friends if we're just keeping up on Instagram? Mm-hmm. And I think that, especially since the pandemic, like some people, when the pandemic restrictions were lifted, raced back into social life, dying to be back out there. But other people had got comfortable not really making the effort to go out. And the reality is that people show so much of their lives on Instagram that even though you and I, Hannah, have never met, if you're following me on Instagram, you'd say, oh, Ruth was at a Valentine's event on Valentine's Day. Oh, Ruth was in Seville after. And you can feel like you know people when in fact you don't. And it kind of comes back to the idea that many people might recognize is that, like, in the age of social media, are we actually staying close to our old friends, or are we just staying updated? So that was another angle. So I thought, okay, I need to get these three women under the one roof. And that's when I had the shock of a friend who's only 49 passing away. So they all have to return to the small town where they all went to school for a week, because there's a wake and there's a funeral and there's a memorial service. And one of the girls, Fern, who is a theatre actor in the Globe, in Shakespeare's Globe in London, she was the cool person growing up, and her parents are really arty, and she has a free house or an empty house. So she invites the women to stay with her. And initially, the three of them are so excited, in one way, so excited about staying under the roof again.
Yeah.
And in another way, kind of really sad that they have to return for a funeral of somebody the same age. So that's how I came up with the opening and how I got them back to this small town in the west of Ireland.
Yeah. And had it been a while since they'd all been there then?
Yeah, so it's like they've been bridesmaids at each other's weddings, and then it's kind of, you know what can happen. So like Chloe, because Fern lives in London, Chloe visited her for a holiday, and then at a different time, Nora might have gone to see her.
Yeah.
And then when they had children, they would have visited each other, but they've never been under the same, it's like 30 years since they've been under the same roof without their partners, back as if they were still 18 again. And as the book starts, they're obviously delighted to be getting reacquainted. But of course, in every small town, when there's a funeral, I'm sure it's not in Ireland, but people will travel for a funeral, particularly if it's a young person or if it's a bit of a shock. So people start to arrive in the town, and some of them they're happy to see, and some of them they're absolutely not happy to see. And this stirs up old emotions and secrets that they've kept from each other. And they start to kind of, as the secrets and the drama kind of comes out, they start to wonder how well they really know each other. How could they keep some secrets that are really important for over 30 years? So it brings up all those kind of emotions, and the setting is kind of perfect for it because it is out, like you said, on the wild Atlantic way, but Belmullet is on the route of the wild Atlantic way, but you have to come off the route to get to it. So nobody drives through Belmullet to get to somewhere else unless you're going to New York. Like literally, it's so far out the west of Ireland that the next cafe is actually in New York City. So you have to go off the beaten track. And I wanted to also, like, there's no train station in Belmullet. So I wanted it to be rural enough that when things get uncomfortable, you can't hop in your car and go home, or you can't you can't go to the nearest airport, you can't hop on a train. You kind of have to sit it out. So that's why I wanted a small town and a rural location.
Yeah, wow. It's amazing from a gem of an idea. There's so much scope, isn't it, that you can do with this. It's great. It's really exciting with both the location and also all the people coming back, plus the relationship between the friends themselves. There's a lot there to unpack. It's great.
Yeah. Yes. And, the funny thing about small towns, and in fact, not even small towns, but even like I live in Dublin City, but if people are coming home for Christmas time and then they'd usually meet in the pub that they always used to meet in, there's bound to be somebody. You could have left home and become a neurosurgeon in the Mayo Clinic in Boston, and someone would still say, do you remember that time you fancied my sister when you were 16? Or do you remember that time, something embarrassing that you did? Like when you come home, people really bring you back down to earth. So that can happen anywhere. But in a small town, people would have known your people, your parents. They would have really seen you grow up. So, and Chloe in particular in the book absolutely hates that. So she's the wild one in the book. She never really wants to come back home, even though her parents live there. But she hates that idea that people would know you and remember you from when you were a teenager. so there's a whole load of emotions, that come up with that.
Yeah. It's funny because other people would love that, that familiarity and coming home and just feeling comfortable, knowing where you are, knowing everybody there. I can see why that's a really lovely feeling, but I guess for some, why you would hate it, I suppose.
Yeah, and Fern absolutely loves it. She's the character who lives in London, and so she really loves that, and she loves coming home. But then her parents were really artistic and used to travel around the world with exhibitions and things like that. And she's an only child, so she would have grown up in a bohemian household, and she would have had a lot of freedom. And Chloe grew up in a house like literally down the road, but with really narrow-minded, the highly religious parents who suffocated her. So she felt, even living in a barren, wild area with loads of space, she just feels claustrophobic and suffocated when she comes back. So it is interesting how you can grow up in the same environment, physical environment, and have completely different views on it.
Yeah, definitely. And so presumably throughout the book, we get to understand so much more about the friends and their different backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And, slowly but surely we see their lives, how they've panned out. And then things start to crop up. And I deliberately set my books in real places so that I can mention real establishments and real hotels. And it really worked out well. How I actually ended up setting the book in Belmullet is that there's an Irish college out there, and my son went to it. And this, again, was after the pandemic, when things were only starting to open up and we hadn't travelled anywhere. And I didn't want to go to a city full of people. We were all still a bit paranoid and not too sure what the situation was like. So when I saw where his Irish college was located, for people who don't know, children in Ireland can go to Irish college over the summer holidays for 2 or 3 weeks to study the Irish language in areas where they still speak it. So that they're immersed in the language. And they tend to be west of Ireland, rural areas. So that's where he was going. So we actually rented a cottage for a week there, and we just walked all over that peninsula. But what was great then was when I went back to do research, I remember that there's flashbacks in the story to 1999 when they were 18 years old. And I remember asking the receptionist if I could ask her a couple of questions about what it was like back then. So it turned out that she was the exact same age as my characters, and she was delighted to tell me. So I got great local information on things like, when you finish your exams, where would you go drinking, things like when you're underage. So all that is in the book. I find that as opposed to writing a fictitious town, if you're writing a real town, you're going to get those little snippets that I really hope that when somebody from Belmullet or Mayo picks up that book, they go, oh yeah, I know exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah, nice. Absolutely. And the fact that the book's called The Last Week of Him, does that mean that the person who died was a male friend?
Yes, Danny O'Connor, and because it was a mixed school. And the funny thing about that was the same receptionist, I gave her an idea of what it was about, and that somebody had died, and he was the golden boy. He was the best looking and the best sports person. So when I'm coming up with characters, before I even put pen to paper, I usually pick personalities like celebrities that my characters look like. And so for Danny, the guy who passed away, I have him as Paul Mescal when he's 18, and then I have him as Aidan Quinn when he's 49. So
Nice.
I printed out those pictures, and then I write a small bio beside it, what they like, what they don't like. And then I have a Keanu Reeves in there, dark and mysterious, who returns from Australia. So I had all these, I have a Mark Ruffalo as well. So I had all these men stuck up on my husband was coming in going, oh, are they going to stay up there?
Research.
Yeah, 100%. I must find out what Mark Ruffalo is doing right now. So, but one interesting thing was, it is a small town. So I told the receptionist that there was a wake and a funeral and blah, blah, blah. And who would I talk to? I wanted to make sure, I presumed we did things differently in the city than they would rurally. So she said to me, "Oh, you need to talk to Porrick. He's the undertaker." And I was like, "Oh, okay, where'll I find him?" And she said, "You'll find him in his pub." So the undertaker in the town, and this is real, true. So the pub owner is also the undertaker.
Brilliant.
So I went down to the local pub. I went in and I asked for him, and he came in a shirt and tie because he had just done a funeral. And
you couldn't make it up, could you?
Unbelievable. I know it sounds so Irish. So, and the funeral home was 2 doors down from the pub. So he just goes between one and the other. So, but the one thing I had to get right was I said to him, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't somebody called Danny O'Connor in the area or even in the county before you go killing people off.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So anyway, he confirmed to me that O'Connor was not a Mayo name. That would be from further down the in another part of Ireland. So that's fine. So I just wanted to make sure. So he was able to give me all that information, and he was able to give me information about how, like in Ireland, we wake people and a lot of the time at home. And we still do that in Dublin City as well. So I just needed to get bits of information. So it is really great to have kind of boots on the ground. And even things like I had picked out a house where the women had stayed, and I had to pace it out to the nearest beach. So I was walking around the place with a notebook and a pen. I probably looked like some sort of tax informer or something. I don't know, a suspicious character or somebody from the broadband company, because I was marching up and down the roads, timing how long these things would take. But I think that's what makes a book more authentic as well.
Definitely, so important. And as you say, there'll be people obviously reading the book that have never been to that part of Ireland or even that part of the world, and they'll enjoy the story for what it is. But as you say, really lovely for people who do know that area really well to relate to all the different places and know that that's how long it would take to get to the beach from a certain road or whatever.
Yeah, well, there's nothing worse than reading something and going, that's not right, or that doesn't exist, or that wouldn't happen there. But also I'm having a Dublin book launch, which is what I usually do, but I'm actually having the following week, I'm going to Belmullet because they have an amazing art centre there, and I'm having a Belmullet book launch as well. And there's people coming from different parts of Mayo, because I really wanted to do that because, that's where the book is set. And they don't normally have book launches down there, even though it's an art centre. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the woman who is launching me is a comedy writer from Mayo as well. So I thought, right, if I bring her, they won't run me out of town.
Oh, perfect. I bet they'll all love it. Well, if people want to get a copy of The Last Week of Him, it's out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, in the bookshop section. And it's by Ruth O'Leary, who we've been chatting with. Ruth, thanks so much for joining us. Lovely to chat with you again.
Oh, lovely to talk to you too. Thank you so much.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Laura Clark Walker. She has been fascinated by ghost stories her entire life, which has influenced her writing immensely. She's an English language teacher, linguist, and lover of all things Gothic. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her latest book, Cold Harbour, a Gothic tale of love and death. It's a gripping Gothic fantasy with a strong sense of place, a love letter to British seaside towns and 90s nostalgia. It's a celebration of family and poses questions about heritage and belonging. Welcome to the Book Show, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Hannah.
Oh, it's great to have you. So where does your love of Gothic come from and ghost stories, do you think?
That's a really good question. I would say that, for example, I've grown up in a family who love horror stories, love ghost stories, and also our house is very probably haunted as well. So really, it's been unavoidable. I think it would be slightly strange if I hadn't got to this point where I wasn't obsessed with, darkness and ghosts, etc., because I've been surrounded by it my entire life in some way.
Yeah. So tell us about the background and the kind of inspiration for Cold Harbour.
Really, I would say it's definitely obviously heavily influenced by the Gothic, but also I've mainly grown up in the southeast of England, which has some really beautiful seaside towns, which unfortunately are slightly past their heyday. I'm really thinking of these very kind of Victorian seaside resorts like Margate or Clacton, which had a really beautiful life, but have been very neglected. And really the Gothic is all about these slightly ruined settings where there are, shadows around every corner. There's a sense of decay and decline. So really, to me, that just worked really well together. It felt really evocative. And because I do know these places really well, I've lived in them, I've studied, I've worked in them. It's kind of like a love letter to them as well. All of these things that I love, kind of combined into one story with some extra magic and chaos, etc.
Yeah, great. And tell us about the 90s setting.
Really, I would say there's a few things behind that. First of all, I'm an elder-ish. I would say I'm an elder millennial, at least in spirit. And I really do remember the late 90s very clearly. And, coming up to the millennium and the millennium bug and the millennium dome, all of these millennium things. And I think, again, it's a really evocative image. And also, I would definitely say that 90s nostalgia is massively having a comeback. But also, I think there's a lot of the mystery elements in Cold Harbour that may not work as well if, for example, the characters had WhatsApp and smartphones and could Google things really easily. It would definitely make the book a lot shorter if they could just find answers about things online in about 5 minutes. So it definitely helps when they've just got phone boxes and pages.
Yeah, definitely. Things have changed so much since phones. It's almost hard to remember what it was like having to go to a phone box and stuff, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
So what about the family connection to the book, the celebration of family?
Again, it's definitely influenced by my own family. We have a very multicultural background. I have grandparents and great-grandparents who came from all over the world, for example, Trinidad, Ireland, Central and Eastern Europe. So really, I wanted to reflect that kind of heritage and the fact that we are living in a world where maybe it's not celebrated so much at the moment. And really, I just wanted to have a very diverse cast of characters. And they do say, write what you know. And really, I did, again, want to show the beauty that can be in having this kind of very multi-heritage, mixed-race background. I think it just adds something a bit more interesting and a bit different that you often don't see in a lot of Gothic novels, at least not in a traditional Gothic novel. So it just adds an extra layer of interest to Cold Harbour, I like to think.
Yeah, how lovely and how nice it must be for you having grandparents from all different countries. I think that's really, really fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to think so, especially in terms of things like languages, sensibilities, obviously things like food and traditions.
Yeah.
I think, it's a really beautiful thing that I definitely appreciate now.
Yeah, nice. My husband does as well, but I don't. I'm gone back through generations, and for me, it's just East London all the way, which is rather boring. So no, I think it's fascinating chatting to people who have so many different kind of walks of life and cultures coming into their family history. It's amazing.
Well, I do have a lot of East London in my family as well. So I can absolutely relate to that.
We get everywhere, clearly.
Absolutely.
So what about the characters? Can you tell us about some of the main characters in the book?
Yes, of course. I mean, I would say our protagonist is Alex Wilde. She's 30 years old. She's a single mother. She's been having mental health difficulties, so she's been away from Cold Harbour for about a month. And at the opening of the book, she's come back home. She wants to make a fresh start. She wants to have her daughter living with her again. She needs to find a new job, somewhere to live. which already sounds like a lot, but then she gets pulled into this very supernatural murder mystery. And she's probably one of the few people in Cold Harbour who can help solve this, because she has her own magic, which is called power with a capital P. And while she doesn't like to use power, she can't help but get involved and try to save innocent people. And then she meets a mysterious waitress who she falls in love with. You also meet the rest of her family. So you meet her brother and sister, her ex, her daughter. So Alex is definitely the most important character, but I would say a lot of readers have really responded to this whole family unit that surrounds her, particularly her girlfriend Elizabeth, but also her brother and her sister and her daughter, who some of which do have power, this magic that's in their blood. Others don't, which also adds a really nice contrast, because nobody's perfect in Cold Harbour, I would say, but also no one is perfect in real life. So I've tried to include a lot of interesting, family dynamics. There's a complicated family history going on. So yes, those are the main points, I would say, without giving away too many spoilers.
Yeah. And was it fun weaving in the paranormal and magic aspect to it, but still trying to make it realistic? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love anything paranormal, and I do think that it makes these things more fun. But yes, equally, I was aiming to keep it grounded in the sense of the book does really talk about some important issues around, for example, what it does mean to have a mixed race background, why mental health is so important. It does also deal with things like disability and sexuality, all of these things, which are really serious topics that obviously deserve to be treated with the utmost respect, but equally wanting to balance what can be quite heavy and intense at sometimes with something a little bit more fun, sometimes a bit chaotic. And I like to think that the two aspects balance each other quite well. People have said that Cold Harbour can be an intense read, but definitely also a fun read, which is really what I intended. Something that really means something, but equally is enjoyable and isn't too heavy and too grounded.
Yeah, I suppose when you're putting in subjects like mental health and sexuality and different racial backgrounds and things like that, it's wanting to make all those things seem completely normal. So instead of making the story about them, they're just part of the story, which should be read as, totally normal things.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like Alex is openly bisexual. She has been since she was a teenager. So really, it's not a coming out story because she's already out, and it's more, she is now falling in love with this woman while solving a supernatural murder mystery.
Makes total sense.
Exactly.
Great. And is this definitely going to be a standalone, or could there be a follow-up, do you think?
Well, I'm very excited to announce that the follow-up's coming out soon. Yes, I haven't really said much about it yet, but the first sequel, because this is a series, the first sequel will come out on Halloween, because these are very, very spooky books, and there will be others in various stages of kind of writing and publishing. So yes, Alex and Matthew and Elizabeth's story definitely doesn't end. While the end of Cold Harbour 1 works as quite a nice ending, I knew that there were other stories, there were unanswered questions. So yes, there will be more, much more.
Great stuff. Well, in the meantime, listeners can get a copy of Cold Harbour, A Gothic Tale of Love and Death from our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Laura Clark Walker, who we've been chatting with today. Laura, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.
You're listening to The Book Show with Hannah Murray on TRE.
Joining us on the line now is Howard Linsky. He's a former journalist whose works include crime series and standalones set in the Northeast, including the DC Ian Bradshaw series and 2 espionage novels. He also writes historical fiction and non-fiction. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his new novel, Muse of Fire. It is book 2 in the William Shakespeare Mysteries. Welcome to the Book Show, Howard.
Hi, Anna, and thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So tell us about these William Shakespeare mysteries. Where did you get the idea from?
Yeah, I think originally because, like a lot of people, I had an early view in life of William Shakespeare as being quite a dull soul, that he probably just sat in his room all day writing, and he looks, the few images we have of him, he looks quite middle-aged and dull. And then when you do get into the plays and you watch them and they're portrayed by really good actors, you think, actually, he understood a great deal about life and had obviously lived a fairly lively existence as well. He knew the inside of a tavern and he knew what it was like to do, be in love or in lust or be jealous or get into an argument. So I thought, there's a fascinating guy. And the more I read about him as a young man, the more I realised he lived in a really incredible time with a lot of larger-than-life characters in the court of Elizabeth and the Elizabethan era. And it was a very dangerous time to be a writer as well. So that was the backdrop that I started to think about setting some stories about Shakespeare too. And the other factor is we don't know what he did for 7 years in his life. He had lost years that even the most eminent Shakespearean scholars know nothing about. So that's great for an author.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, is it weird when you're writing about somebody who really existed, particularly someone like Shakespeare, because there are these scholars out there? Has it been sort of nerve-wracking that people might come and criticize you or say, oh, he never would have done that and that's not realistic and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was pretty conscious of that. It's the same for any reader, really, that might think, oh, that would never happen. So I did an awful lot of research to make sure that I did know what I was talking about and that I'd argue that my theories on his life and the way he lived his life are as valid as someone who's gone the more scholarly route, really, because, again, as I say, there's very little on record about him. For 7 years, there's nothing, and the rest of it is open to interpretation. And I think you can read into the stuff that he wrote a little bit, perhaps, about his personality. You probably can with all writers. There's clues in there about what they think about life, even when they're writing about other people and larger-than-life scenarios. And I felt reasonably confident by the end of it that I'd written something that couldn't be totally debunked by somebody, I don't know, in Oxford or Cambridge.
Great. And what about Queen Elizabeth? I mean, there's obviously a lot written about her over the years.
Yeah, she's an incredible character. I mean, a very strong ruler who famously was the Virgin Queen, never took a husband, never theoretically had a lover, but had endless series of court favourites over her reign. And in Muse of Fire, the latest book that I've written about the Shakespeare Mysteries series, that happens to be the Earl of Essex, who she fell absolutely in love with, despite the fact that he was around 30 years her junior at this point and ran her a bit ragged for a while there. So, yeah, the characters just leap from the page of history books into the novel, really. The personalities help them write themselves, I think.
Yeah. And where does the mystery side come into the books?
So in this one, it starts with the untimely death of a young and fair lady-in-waiting of the Queen's who was found dead at the bottom of a stone staircase, and nobody knows why. She was out in the middle of the night, whether she fell, whether she jumped, whether she was thrown to her death by someone, and whether is it then in fact a murder, and what secret did she have that warranted anybody to kill her. So Sir Robert Cecil, who is the Queen's spy catcher and chief inquisitor, is basically suspicious that there may be something going on here that might be a little too subtle for his usual agents to look into, because he hires rough men to do his work, but occasionally in the Shakespeare Mysteries he calls on a man who's more subtle to use his skills as a writer and as an actor to blend in and interpret things. And that man happens to be a young and rather reluctant Will Shakespeare, who is set the task of finding out what happened to Lady Anne and what huge secret she was carrying when she died.
And in terms of the research into the Elizabethan era and what it was like, I'm assuming you've learnt an awful lot as to what it must have been like to be around then.
Yeah, there's huge amounts written about it, which is good, but it does mean you have to plough through quite a lot of biographies of Shakespeare and Elizabeth and the fringe characters. But it was kind of fun to do. It wasn't research in a boring sense. That if you find the right history book written by the right people, it really is a fascinating period. And it was a very dangerous time to be a writer. Most of Shakespeare's contemporaries, the ones that were started out as rivals, were gone by the time he reached his peak. So Christopher Marlowe was effectively murdered, although it's classed as a brawl, but he was killed for a reason. And that reason, I think, was because historically he was pretty much proven to be one of Cecil's agents. So I was allowed to take a little bit of, a poetic license maybe, with the idea that Cecil might have actually employed Will to do some stuff for him when he actually employed Christopher Marlowe, the big playwright of the era. And another one, Thomas Kidd, was tortured on the rack and died a year later. And Thomas Nash went to prison for writing heretical plays that the Queen didn't like. So, words were very dangerous back then. You could end up jailed, tortured, or murdered. So Will was walking a very fine line with what he was writing.
Yeah, gosh. And what about all the speculation over the years as to whether William Shakespeare actually wrote his plays? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as you might have much, and I have some quite strong thoughts on that. I even put it as a little subplot in the books that people are constantly asking him who really wrote that play, because you're just a country lad from Stratford and you never went to Cambridge and all that. Like when Will takes offence to that, hits back, and other people are cited as the actual authors of his books, that it's considered absurd by Will that anybody could think he didn't write them. And that's my way of saying I'm totally on his side and in his camp on this one. I never understand the idea that he couldn't have written them just because he wasn't a Cambridge man, or that he never fought in a war, or that he didn't travel to Italy, or what have you. I mean, writers have imaginations, and by that logic, I probably, as a small town boy from the northeast of England, I'm an unlikely person to write books involving the Elizabethan world and William Shakespeare. So I'm very much on Will's side. There's quite a lot of evidence that says he wrote them all. There is zero evidence that anyone else wrote them. So I rest my case.
Fair enough. And how many do you know is there going to be in the series? Have you worked that out or not yet?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I always intended it to be a trilogy, and I'm working on the third one as we speak. So the first one, Place of Death, is out in paperback now. Muse of Fire has just come out in hardback, and then very close to finishing the third, because we always, as authors, we're always working a year ahead. You have to, otherwise you'd never get the books out in time. But I think that would probably be it. Unless I suddenly get an amazing idea for book 4. But I'll probably write something else after that.
Yeah. And has it been quite nice focusing on this series away from the other work that you've done, the other books that you've written in different genres?
Yeah, it was a nice change. I've spent quite a bit of my career writing about northeast-based crime fiction, and I love doing that. But then every now and again I like to go off and do something different. So I did a couple of books on military history in the Second World War. When I say military history, I mean as a novel rather than non-fiction, and that was great to do. This is the first time I've dabbled in an era dating back 400 years, but I did enjoy reading about it and then translating it into something that is hopefully a book you don't want to put down, you want to get to the end of. And it was a challenge, but I really enjoyed it. Putting myself in Will Shakespeare's head for a few hours every day is pretty entertaining.
Yeah, amazing. Well, if people want to get a copy of Muse of Fire, it's out now. It's book 2 in the William Shakespeare Mysteries. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, in the bookshop section, and it's by Howard Linsky, who we've been chatting with. Howard, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on, Hannah.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Julia Clarkson. She lived and worked in London before moving to Brighton. One of her stories was shortlisted by the novelist Beryl Bainbridge for an international short story competition. Encouraged by this, she went on to write a children's book, Netherworld, published in 2009. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her first foray into writing young adult fiction. It's called Chicken and Chips, and it aims to expose the devastating ripple effects of addiction. Welcome to the Book Show, Julia.
Thank you.
It's great to have you with us, and congratulations on your debut young adult fiction novel. How does it feel?
It feels wonderful, thank you.
Oh, nice. Have you been working on it a while?
I actually finished it in 2005.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I probably started writing it 25 years ago.
Oh, amazing. So definitely you've been working on it a while.
Well, I know, but over the years I've tried to get it accepted, but nothing happened. I'm really pleased the Book Guild took it up.
Yes, lovely.
Last year I did revise it and wrote new chapters.
Okay. Oh, nice. And I understand a lot of the inspiration and kind of thought behind the book was your late husband, who was an alcoholic, because a lot of this is about alcoholism.
It is, yes.
So can you tell us a bit about him and his struggles?
My protagonist, Jake, his father is a fictional character and in no way resembles my husband, but most of the incidents related in the book really happened.
Wow. Can I ask you about some of them?
Well, the man battered in fish shop newspaper article.
Tell us about that article. What do you mean?
Well, it was in our local paper. My husband had gone into, he was drunk when he went into the fish and chip shop, and it ended with a fight. Well, apart from being fined, the main problem was us, that we were no longer allowed in the fish and chip shop, which was our favourite place.
Oh, and that was the headline talking about your husband?
Yeah, it says Man Battered. I thought it was a wonderful title.
Yes, very clever.
Man Battered in Fish Shop.
Oh,
but I mean that was a regular occurrence with him.
Oh. And tell us about the time him falling off the platform at Waterloo Station.
He fell off the platform at Waterloo Station, only inches from the live rail.
Oh, goodness.
Then he fell from top to bottom on the tube station escalator.
Oh.
And eventually he died after another fall at Monument Underground Station.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, writing this book, I just hoped it would, I wanted to write about the self-destructive nature of heavy drinking and the effect that can have on family life.
Yeah, absolutely.
They said you should write about what you know, and I certainly know about that.
Yeah. So why did you want to aim it at young adults?
Because 1 in 5 children in the UK are affected by their parents drinking.
Wow.
It's a very realistic, hard-hitting novel depicting what life is like for many children living with an alcoholic dependent parent.
Yeah. So are the main characters the father and the child?
Child is called Jake, yes. Yeah. I would say it's a realistic, hard-hitting novel, but then I think a tough subject deserves tough writing.
Yeah.
And it does come with a content warning.
Okay.
I think it's a bit like Marmite. You'll either love it or hate it.
So why have you called it Chicken and Chips?
Oh, because that's what my husband, he'd go out drinking late at night, and then coming back, he'd pop into the local Kentucky. As he walked back home, he would sort of scatter bits of chicken and chips in his wake. And some of Jake's schoolmates, who were still out on their bikes, would bait him like a bear and taunt him. So that was why.
Okay.
And then, of course, he'd eventually come home to us, paralytic, falling in the door.
That must have been really difficult. And, I mean, did he know he had a problem, or...?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it just reflected on, 9 times out of 10 he was out of work. He couldn't hold a job down. He'd start drinking and get dismissed. So
Very, very hard for you to deal with all that.
Well, I'm the children. I had a son and a daughter, but although the main character, Jake, is in no way based upon my son, they're completely different.
Yeah.
I just felt that it was something that needed to be exposed.
Yeah. And how did your children cope with his drinking? It must have been hard for them as well.
It was very hard, but they've turned out exceptionally well. I'm very proud of them, and I've got 4 grandchildren now.
Oh, how nice. So can you tell us a bit more about Jake and his dad in the book?
There's a lot of, concentrated on the darker side. There's also a lot of humour in the book. I mean, it traces Jake. I mean, apart from his home life and the bullying, there are a lot of lighter moments as well. It's a typical teenager. He's got crushes and friendships and what he does when he goes out with his friend. I mean, it's a typical teenager. It's not just concentrated on the alcoholism.
Yeah. So we learn a lot about Jake. He's the main character then, you'd say?
Well, it's written in the first person. I am Jake, which I think is quite a feat in itself for someone of my age to be writing through the eyes of a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah, and how was that?
Quite easy, actually. I think I've got a really vivid imagination, which does help.
Yes. So has this made you want to write more, do you think?
Well, I wrote a crime novel last year, so I might see how I get on with that. This is my second published book.
And amazing that the 3 books are all completely different genres. That's quite a skill to write in different genres.
Yes, I know. Especially the crime novel.
So you want to write more crime?
No, actually, I'm going to write a sequel to Chicken and Chips.
Okay.
And it's called Caviar and Chips.
Right. Where does that come from? How is he upgraded?
Well, because we leave Jake when he's just about to enter sixth form college. So that will be about him, in the sixth form college, and then a bit further on from that.
Okay.
I just want to see, having created him, I just want to see how he progresses.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, for the moment, people can get a copy of Chicken and Chips. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Julia Clarkson, who we've been chatting with. Julia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit TRE.radio.